when you start thinking about having a self-driving car and the self-driving car is driving, who pays for the insurance? And so we're going to explore some of those topics related to real-world examples about when you have this robo-car, when you have a level 4 car. And in our case, it's a dual mode car, which means you can have it in level 4 or you can drive it. How do we think about insurance? Because it's all changing. And this is as Jay said, the third session in our series, The Shift. Why do we call it The Shift? Because we believe there's a fundamental shift going on, not just in automotive, but in technology. And we're exploring those topics of conversation with distinguished guests, visionaries, and the leaders in the industry. So thank you, Hugo and Tom, for being here. Tom, let's get started with a concept called the liability cliff. Let's talk about that, and how does it change when there's no human driver?
So thanks for having me here. I actually we want to go before that. The first question is, if I asked myself 20 years ago, would I ever be in front of CES talking about insurance? I had no clue, no vision here. So there are a couple of reasons. Anytime we have a vehicle, wheels on the ground, insurance is needed. It's required. In the United States, it's crazy. It's wildly complex, regulated in all 50 states. Right? It's very different. It's a pain. We don't like writing the checks. It's very difficult. You take that on a worldwide basis, it gets exponentially more difficult. That's number one. Number two, and I thought back to the session that we had earlier today with Lyft, where really when we're looking at these vehicles and any kind of advanced technology, insurance is a proxy for trust. And what I mean by that is that we buy insurance. Why? Well, because if things go bad, we don't want to write a full check for it, whether it's for something to us or damage we've done to others. And so we spread out the risk. And so when we get back to this initial question, we look at vehicles over the years, 99.99% of accidents, and that's a fact, were because of driver error. Yeah, we talk about it, we think about all these instances where go back 10 years ago. There were reports of a certain manufacturer, people stepped on the brake and the car accelerated. That doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Maybe you can convince a jury that it's a thing. It's not a thing, right? So you look at that. You look at what's happened over the years in terms of driver safety, even as simple as anti-lock brakes. You look at airbags, et cetera. All these driver safety systems are meant to make the car safer and safer. Now, still, even with those, you cannot use those. You can ignore them, right? You can override them. And so you still get to accidents dominantly, overwhelmingly caused by driver error. As we start to get to level 4 automation, right, what we're looking at is really trusting the vehicle, trusting all these crazy 100 plus sensors in the car to do what they're supposed to do. And we have seen the test data, all the road tests, accidents, whether it's general accidents or with people involved, it's reduced by upwards of 90%. And that is data, right? So we actually let the cars do what they can do. And what it does is it shifts the liability for me as an individual having to buy insurance for my errors to, well, you know what? It was the manufacturer, it was a software provider, it's a component, something went wrong there. And so that does mean, yes, the liability shifts to the vehicle developer rather than the individual.
We obviously have built an agentic vehicle with a foundational model. How is that different? How do we explain to insurers, how is it different from a rules-based robotics model?
Yeah, so the way we've done this is to actually make it think more like human. So in the context of driving, you effectively have the system making short-term decisions, just like a human does. And then they're also simultaneously more strategically thinking ahead, how the system should.
They're multitasking.
Correct, yes.
And then from an insurance perspective, we've obviously started working with Marsh, and we're talking about the world's first level 4 insurance model. What was the conversation like when you had to go and say, wait a second, we're doing something very different. Let's start the conversation on a new model. Do you guys both want to address that?
Sure. So let me start. So Marsh, we're an advisor in the middle. So we're what's called insurance broker. So you think about large insurance companies. We're actually helping our technology clients, and that's the team that I run, figure out how to use insurance to actually accelerate growth, protect their products, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The conversations are really interesting. And, I'm not trying to discount anybody here, but the reality is, insurance companies, because they have so much money, so much profit, so much incentive to insure automobiles, right? They want to be in this game. But one of the things that happens with insurance companies is if they don't understand it, they need to charge more. They need to charge more for that uncertainty, that risk premium. So the leading insurers do have teams that are actually looking at the technologies. They're looking at the data. They're really trying to understand this and trying to invest forward. But with every bit of respect, there is no insurance company or no team that is going to fully understand everything you're doing, everything that's in your vehicle. And so what it comes down to is the data and the results and kind of like taking the back upstream to see. And what I mean by that is insurance companies for decades, as long as we've known, they're really the only ones that have the view on the data across all in terms of what accidents, what happens, what causes them, what the cost was, et cetera, et cetera. We can look at it now and you can go to an insurance company, say our car's better. They're going to get it and they're going to invest and work with you all, right? But they're not going to really know until they see the end result, which is, yep, there were fewer crashes. Now, that's interesting though is, that's the event that actually happens where we can start to tip the scales a little bit is, and we're going to talk about this later, I know, in terms of privacy of the data and so on, which is, user controlled. The more that we can actually share crash avoidance data and other things, insurance companies don't have that, allows us to get a little bit ahead of the pricing. And so once again, I'm not trying to minimize it. They need to understand generally what this technology is doing, but they're not going to understand it in a level to really price their models.
I think that's an important point, though, that the crash avoidance data that is not readily available right now for insurers.
Not at all.
And so this is a whole new world of being able to have not just the error, but also all these potential crashes, potential errors that are happening with the vehicle, the risk, the liability, to be able to show that actually this technology potentially is far safer.
Well, even that, so you take an incident, and even if the driver does the best as they can and the technology works as it should, we still have the ability to track all this data. What exactly did happen in an accident? How far was that other car into the intersection? Exactly how fast were they going? Who was in the intersection or not? Did the person step on the anti-lock brakes and actually keep their foot on the pedal? Did they do that? What was their reaction time? Looking at the eyes, were they distracted? And then they looked. So we actually have all that data. So once again, so that's where we can take it. And then we know the end result. Insurers, once again, I say this with all respect, they don't need to understand the details of how the technology works, but if they understand the actions and then turn that into kind of training, kind of the retrospective lessons learned and training, then that starts to actually reduce the accidents, right? And then we can actually be paying less for insurance.
So the entire underwriting methodology, how insurers are underwriting policies now, that's going to change.
It's absolutely changing, and it's already changing. And so every insurance company, every company that's in the space, the telematics or otherwise, they all want the data. They all want the data, right? And I'm going to come back to what I said before. Anytime there are wheels on the ground, insurance has to be applied. Now, it is already changing, as you mentioned. So, like, say you had Lyft before, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. When you look at a company like Lyft or any of the food delivery services or anything like that, there already are new pricing models for insurance. So you don't just say, okay, I'm giving my car to Lyft, or I'm driving for a food delivery company, just charge me whatever you want for insurance. They're actually, for the last number of years, have been experimenting with, well, let me look at per trip. Let me look at per mile. Let me look at it per package. They're already doing that. And then when you have Tensor, right, you look at it and say, okay, I'm an individual. I don't need as much insurance for liability. So maybe liability for when I'm driving the car outside of a zone, right? But I don't need liability for my fault as the driver if I'm, sitting back. I don't need that. But when it's parked in my driveway, I need insurance in case my kid hits it with a baseball bat, or in case something falls off my house or tree in my yard. That's on me. I got it. But then I'm letting Lyft use my car, right? So you look at that, am I letting Lyft use my car 80% of the time or 20% of the time, right? So you actually want your insurance to be, variably rated. So, because once again, as I said, if insurance companies are uncertain to how you're going to use your car, they're going to have to charge you more. But if you can be specific in terms of how you're using it, breaking it down to literally, yes, when is, am I using it in my driveway versus when is it at Lyft versus when is it under Lyft's control and it's parked in a public parking lot, versus when is it back on and when is someone in it versus not, all breaks down.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, there's like sort of, two key takeaways overall. In level 4 mode, responsibility is on the OEM, is on us. Premiums will be lower. I think that for consumers, this is a consumer electronics show. I think
Let's
this should be
double
music to
tap
people's
on
ears.
that a little bit, because
Yeah.
that is actually a fundamental difference. If there's a takeaway, you take away. Hugo said something really important here. When a level 4 vehicle for personal ownership is being operated in level 4 mode by its owner, the owner is not liable because they can't do anything. And that was really one of the things that early on Tensor thought about. And so obviously there's safety protocols and lots of, part of the reason why we have an agentic car, and there's so many sensors. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the fundamental differences. A lot of the other vehicles that you may see around here or that are driving around are actually technically level 2 vehicles, in which case the owner or the driver is the human fallback. In our case, it's very different. In our case, we have the world's first foldable steering wheel sitting right behind Amy. So when the owner, when the driver wants to drive, he or she can. But in level 4 mode and fully autonomous mode, no. And therefore, this is something that's very, very different. And we're able to do that because of all the kind of technologies that we talked about earlier. But, as Jay had mentioned earlier, this is the world's first vehicle designed and built from the ground up for personal ownership. So we've had to think about all these things, like you had said, from the way beginning. And to achieve that is, we've taken a very sensor-rich approach. We have 100 sensors. We have unprecedented layers of redundancy. We have, true drive-by-wire redundancy, meaning, redundant braking, redundant steering, redundant power, redundant compute, redundant sensing, all the way down to, to the fuse level. So what's underneath the skin that you see is actually, fundamental.
So Tom, do you think that insurance brokers and underwriters are going to dig deep into the OEMs and how they have done the technology in the car? And then obviously from a risk perspective, if the risk is on companies like Tensor in level 4 mode, is the risk profile going to be different depending on the technology in a level 4 or hybrid vehicle?
Yes, yes, and yes. Our company, we have about 90,000 colleagues on a global basis. Out of that, we have about 100 who are pretty deep in this space from different levels. From the OEM standpoint, historically understanding what is it like to actually manufacture a vehicle, right? And even that, the models are changing from a manufacturer, I'm vertically integrated, I own all these pieces, right, to contract manufacturing. That even changes it, because even with liability, that changes, okay, let's say Tensor is responsible for the final product, right? But behind the scenes, who might have messed up? So you have a lot of partners. So it even changes from that perspective. And even within that, it breaks down insurance. And I don't want to give everyone insurance 101, but it gets into mind-numbing detail in terms of product recall, component recall, and things like that. It really breaks down into a lot of different pieces. But with that, we do have, whether it's Tensor or even whether it's trucking companies using telematics, right? The insurance industry, our colleagues have been all over this for the past 10 plus years, digging in deeper and deeper and deeper. And so I said, we're only going to understand it to a certain amount. We actually understand it pretty well. We're working with a lot of companies in this space, from the OEMs down to the component manufacturers, et cetera. So understanding it still, once again, is not going to, just understanding the technology is not going to lead to the pricing and ultimately what we need to pay, right? So it's a little bit of looking at it from both sides and connecting the dots once we start to have the test data. And then as we get even more beyond test data to live data from vehicles operating on the roads. And then, because we're here with Tensor, yes, we will be able to see that fully ground up level 4 has much better overall results than some stuff that's put on a level 2. We will be able to demonstrate that over time for sure.
We touched on it a little bit before, you did, and I'm going to make it a little more complex. So one of the wonderful things about Tensor in particular is that we've announced our partnership with Lyft. And so now we're opening up the world for rideshare and fleet enablement. Hugo, do you want to talk a little bit about our thinking behind that and the monetization that comes and potential liability that is different when it comes to you operating it as your personal vehicle versus enabling it for a rideshare network?
Yeah, I mean, we've, because we've built the vehicle, the way we have, this is not a retrofit. This is, every single decision has been made for true level 4 autonomy. And by doing so, we have a very solid vehicle that can be used for both robust technology that can be used for, personal ownership, which is about, 85-90% of cars which are produced and sold today are owned by individuals. So just the law of numbers, it's a large market, which we can address because of it. But at the same time, the balance being 10%, whatever it is, are for fleet owners. And we're really excited to have partnered and made the announcement with Lyft. Lyft has actually, they're more than just a ride-hailing company. They actually have the DNA and the culture of and history of owning assets, of owning vehicles. I think they own 15,000 vehicles in North America alone, and now they've expanded over to Europe. So yeah, we're super excited about that. And the thinking there is, for individuals, because this is an agentic vehicle, it's not just an autonomous vehicle. We've actually taken it one step further. The vehicle now works for you. It's your agent. It's your companion. What you want the vehicle to do. But what's amazing about it is that you can have a side hustle. You can have your own way to make money. You lose your job or what have you, and you're not using the vehicle. Let's say, so you put it on the network when you're sleeping or when you're in a meeting or whatever it is, and you end up with that much more money in your pocket, and that's very important because insurance still costs something, unfortunately, but you have also depreciation. I mean, whatever expenses you have associated with the car, and being able to monetize it when you're not using it. From an asset utilization perspective is, and from a monetization perspective to folks is key. People do that with their villas, or with their homes on Airbnb or whatever. So we think it's super exciting, and we're more announcements to come with more fleet owners, but Lyft is one that has made a nice significant order to buy vehicles from Tensor, and stay tuned for more innovative fleet companies like Lyft to buy more from us.
So Tom, this means now we're getting more complex with the insurance scheme, right?
We are, but I think it's also pretty basic and fairly intuitive. We've all been in taxis, rideshare vehicles where we wish we had 10 seatbelts. We don't trust the driver at all. We know those are situations where that driver is probably paying a lot for insurance and should pay a lot for insurance if they don't. We have experience of being with drivers that are, on the other end, they're really too tentative, they're real slow. I think they should also be paying a lot. But then we have that comfort zone, that Goldilocks, kind of right in the middle. They're pretty good, comfortable with that. Think about that from the standpoint of, I have my car, and you know what? I'm not using it. And we're all trying to, I love the great car in my driveway, but yeah, if I can, safely lend it out to someone a couple hours a day or something and, get a little money, that's great. Now, one view is, well, okay, I'll let someone like Lyft, a company like Lyft, use it. I don't know who's going to be driving it. Is it that crazy driver? Or is it that, safe driver? I don't know. Versus, if I'm giving it to Lyft, they're only going to drive it within zone. No one's driving it. Maybe I have to worry about, are the passengers dirty or not? But I'm not worried about my car getting in an accident. And so all of those are kind of intuitive proxies for then how my insurance might work. And so once again, I still find it odd that we're talking about this much about insurance at CES, but we look at it, the fact that it is a business enabler. It's a product enabler. It's almost like there's essentially warranty. I want to buy this insurance. I have to because of laws, but you know what? I'm putting money in this car. I need to protect it. So it's almost like a self-warranty by doing that. And by some of that warranty element in terms of how it performs, right? It's not just whether the car starts or not. It's does it actually drive safely? That does shift to the manufacturer, right? And then some of that will shift to Lyft. And so all these policies, there's no insurance company that's going to say, hi, I invented this policy, it's going to work for everybody. It's not going to happen. We're doing this really from the ground up. And some of the conversations, obviously, we're forward-looking with Tensor in terms of how this works. But they will be more efficient for sure.
So theoretically, a level 4 vehicle like Tensor could have 3 interested parties in the insurance policy. The owner, who has to carry liability insurance for when it's in mode where they're driving.
You're wanting to get way deep now. So we have.
I want to know because I have to insure the car when I get it.
We're talking about these levels 1 through 5, but actually when you get into anything that's sharing mobility, sharing mobility or so on, there are different schema and actually regulations state by state for what the car. So if I'm a driver, and we're say Lyft because they're a partner of yours, so we'll keep on saying that, right? So there's a difference between I'm a Lyft driver and I actually have the app on. And if I have the app on, is it my personal insurance or Lyft's? If I have the app on and I'm going to pick up a ride, mine or Lyft's. I have someone in the car. I've dropped them off. It actually is different by every stage of that. And so, yes, it does differ. And then, adding on one more thing, if Tensor is going to Lyft, right? And let's say, well, it's not Lyft or it's another company where they're actually delivering food. Is that different from delivering a passenger? You will get into that level of detail.
But the good news is these cars are agentic, have sensors and cameras, so we're collecting a lot of data. So there's no mystery about what the car is being used for, where it's going, when it's on rideshare app. Talk about the data privacy aspect of it and what we did uniquely for Tensor when it comes to protecting data privacy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very important, design element and decision that we made, from the way beginning. We fundamentally believe, in freedom. We ultimately believe that the owners who are paying the money for the car, they deserve to have their data protected. They deserve privacy. This is, we think, fundamental for society going forward. And therefore, we actually lock everything down in the vehicle. Everything stays in the vehicle. Down at the chip level. This is very different to other EVs, other OEMs, some of them may be on this floor, that effectively every time you take your phone out and you communicate with the car, that data is going to a cloud, number one, probably not very securely, and number two is being monetized. We think this is not a nice thing for owners. And so we've gone the other way. We've gone away where, the owner decides. And so in this context of insurance, the owner is the one who can say, yes, I believe, or I'm okay with sharing X, Y, and Z if that's going to, lower the cost, or if that's going to do whatever it is, help Marsh or help the underwriter, get what they need to get. And so, but at the end of the day, if they say, hey, we don't want to do that, then they have the option. I think the key is having the option, and not being, the option is not determined by the OEM, but it's actually determined by the end user who's actually paid the money for the car.
So we've got a rolling supercomputer in our car. Is cyber threats or cybersecurity an insurable risk for cars moving forward?
The answer is yes, but when we say cyber, it's like AI. The term AI means everything and it means nothing until you take it down a few levels. Cyber means everything and it means nothing until you take it down a few levels. So there's that clear privacy breach of, in the car, I had my personal information, they know who I am, they know my driver's license number, maybe have my credit card in there because, I was processing some transactions with the car or SiriusXM, whatever it is, right? So that is a privacy breach of cyber. Yes, so clearly there's insurance for that, right? And if you're on, in a Tensor vehicle, I as a driver am assuming that Tensor is going to have the proper controls for that data. Got that. Next level is, well, Tensor told me that you're not going to monitor me while I'm in the garage and parked, and you did. You're not going to do that. You're not doing that, right?
Don't put that in.
No, I know, right? So there is insurance for that. If actually something happened accidentally, right? There's insurance for that, right? But then you also get into this world of cyber. We get into this, business interruption, or there's unintentional, or a hack that actually shuts a car down, where it gets to interrupting the operations, or it turns into, yes, there is insurance for that. So it breaks down at different levels. And unfortunately, the way the regular world of insurance works is just because you're paying insurance premium, the insurance companies don't say, I never imagined this scenario, I'm going to pay you. So what it really does, once again, at the broad tech company level, really getting into the different scenario analysis to making sure all these different scenarios are covered so that you can actually warranty and indemnify your customers, which is ultimately what it's all about.
So theoretically, we've got an AI agentic vehicle. It's very smart. Potentially, instead of an underwriter evaluating the owner and a car, the car could be feeding data to an underwriter to help them understand how to best construct a policy for the owner.
That's actually what does happen now. And it's not done on an individual basis. It's not done on an individual car basis, but I mean, this is data that is scattered every month. And you're looking at it in bulk, right? Depending on what's shared or not, right? Once you get back to the privacy argument, but they're looking at that, and that's where we're building the trail of this underwriting data, the history, and tying it to causes, tying it to the impacts, and hopefully over time tying it to the actual technology that that created that avoided that crash or prevented it from being worse.
I think my mind goes wild with the opportunity of dynamic pricing and things that, your car can potentially, or Tensor can communicate with the insurance broker and say, hey, my person's going to be gone for 2 months. I'm staying in the garage.
Yes.
I don't need insurance for the road because I'm not going to be on the road.
Yes, dynamic pricing, 100%.
Amazing. I think we're at time. First of all, Tom, Hugo, thank you so much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you. We're going to open the floor up to some questions, if there's any questions.
I'm with Shazoom Technologies. We hold the oldest patent on photo estimating electronic repair management. Very pleased. I was telling my fleet colleague, should we be here for insurance for post-crash repair? So it's good to hear what you're saying. So I'm curious to understand what you're doing when, I understand it's supposed to be less crashes, but we know that crashes still happen, right? With Tensor, with all the AVs, all the EVs. How are you handling that today? And what does that look like 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, with crashes, we obviously are recording, the data stays in the vehicle. We know what happens in a crash. I can talk about, there was an example of this happened recently with another company, in which case, there was an accident, and they were able to actually pinpoint the reason for the accident and who is at fault because of all the sensors in the vehicle. So what we were talking about earlier is that all of this is pretty transparent these days. Understanding exactly the root cause. So similar to like maybe a black box in an airplane that can record, before and after.
So a couple things. Everything is possible. I would say the traditional model of an insurance adjuster, I would not bet on that career. Because there will be self-reporting, it will be automated, or we're already seeing it with a lot of the major companies where it's just send me the pictures and I'll settle it and we're good. And remember that insurance companies work on the law of averages. So take a lot of costs out of the system. On average, this works. It's faster. We get it done. We're good. So that is going to happen. It is going to be streamlined. There's just no doubt about it. And then also you think about it, I would imagine, this is a little bit hard to think about, but actually getting that into municipalities from kind of the legal regulatory standpoint in terms of the first responders and so on, the police in terms of accident reports, data dump information, and it's not, here I am with my pen that I got at Dunkin' Donuts trying to fill out the report. More information, it creates certainty, it lowers the cost, speed of resolution. It's all taking friction out of the system.
I'd love to hear more one-on-one. That's what we do. We cut it by 47% downtime and 25% repair costs. So I was more about the process is what you were talking about, Tom. I'd love to learn more. Thank you so much. Great.
I've already had the chance to speak to Hugo as well. So, Dr. Lucy Davey, I'm a psychiatrist by background, got an interest in EVs. I have a brand called the EV Mum on LinkedIn. Oh, I get a bit closer, sorry. My question is, obviously at the moment, there's a big difference in terms of, certainly in the UK, in terms of, males and females, in terms of, sort of cost to insure a car. So with the autonomous cars, I'm assuming there's going to be sort of more equality in this aspect as well going forward. Is that a prediction?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were just, the cars are definitely, kind of, the thing is, he was saying gender neutral, but the thing is, it's agentic, so you can decide, whether you wanted a female or a male. But no, but the point is, absolutely, it's definitely going to be more, standardized across the driving.
I hope we can move past gender-specific insurance. That would be a good day.
But actually, you bring up a good point. I mean, the nice thing about this technology is that it's very consistent, right? The driving style, in a similar condition is very smooth, very consistent, it's very peaceful, so that's the nice thing about it.
Well, we'll take it beyond male, female. You look at all the other major factors too. It's age. Am I a young driver? Am I an older driver? Am I driving by myself to work? Am I angry at the end of work? Am I caffeinated in the morning? Am I in a rush? Do I have 3 screaming kids in the car or not? Those are actually the bigger factors.
Yeah, I suppose there's a little bit of a trade-off because obviously women have got away with paying a little bit less, but I'm hoping going forward as well, as I was saying to Hugo, we might get a little bit more sort of female kind of input, a lipstick holder, all the kind of practical things that mums and women, might not have perhaps, had such great sort of involvement in terms of speccing the car.
Yeah, it can multitask more like a woman than the man. So
okay, let me take it away from that. There are differences in terms of severity versus frequency of accidents. That obviously that is a fact, right? So reduce the frequency and reduce the severity.
Yeah.
It's going to hit all.
Well, once again, thank you so much for attending this session of The Shift, where we talk to visionaries and leaders in the L4 autonomous industry. And if you want to watch this content, you can see it on our YouTube channel, Tensor's YouTube channel. So thank you very much, and welcome to the world of L4 autonomy.